From a certain perspective, the earth tilts, and all its water, all its memory, gathers at the rim. Here, at the northwestern fringe of the European continent, it solidifies into stone and ice. A fracture in the map. A 2,500-kilometer scar of majesty. This is Norway. It is a coastline longer than the entire circumference of the Earth at the equator would suggest. A land where the horizon is not a line but a series of interruptions, sheer cliffs, silent fjords, and peaks that hold the clouds. To most of the world, it is a postcard. An idea of purity, prosperity, and perfect light. But a country is not a photograph. It is a story, written in geology, in bloodlines, in political will, and in quiet, daily choices. Over the next 2 hours, we will not just look at Norway. We will listen to its rhythms, from the ancient pulse of the glaciers to the quiet hum of the world's most ambitious savings account. We will explore the paradox of a society built on oil money that aspires to be the greenest on earth, the tension between profound communal trust and a deep cultural insistence on solitude, and the reality of life in a land where the sun is a seasonal guest. This is a journey to the land of the midnight sun and the polar night, to a nation consistently ranked the best place to live, to ask the simple, complex question, what has Norway built, and at what cost? The foundation of the Norwegian story is not political or economic. It is elemental. It is written in the grammar of stone and sea. Over hundreds of millions of years, tectonic plates collided, raising the Caledonian Mountains, a spine that runs the length of the country. Then, in a series of cold pulses that defined human prehistory, the ice came. Glaciers, thousands of meters thick, ground southward. They were not creators but revealers. They scoured the land, excavating deep U-shaped valleys. When the ice finally retreated, about 10,000 years ago, the sea rushed in, flooding those wounds. What remained were the fjords, not merely inlets, but profound chasms where vertical rock walls plunge hundreds of meters into dark, still water. Gerangerfjord, Sonefjord, Hardangerfjord, their beauty is almost violent in its scale. They were not decorations for a landscape, they were its first highways, its primary reason for settlement. The sea was the source of life, the fjord a protected harbor. This geology dictated a pattern of human life, small, scattered communities clinging to narrow strips of fertile land between the impassable mountains and the deep, cold sea. Isolation was the default condition. From this isolation grew a particular kind of self-reliance, a stoicism, and a profound connection to the immediate, tangible world. The early Norwegians were hunters, then farmers and fishermen. Their world was defined by the seasonal migration of fish and the brief, intense fertility of the northern summer. This relationship with nature was not romantic, it was a matter of survival. It bred a culture of practicality, of using what is at hand, of preparing meticulously for the long, dark winter. The very first Norwegians, following the retreating ice, left behind simple tools and hearths. Their descendants would build ships capable of crossing oceans. But the land offered another lesson, impermanence. The coastline is constantly shifting, rising still from the immense weight of the ancient ice. Ancient harbors are now fields. This slow, geological change instilled a long perspective. And above it all, the light performed its annual drama. North of the Arctic Circle, the sun does not set for weeks in summer. The midnight sun bathes the world in a surreal, golden twilight, a time of endless energy. But the debt comes due in winter. The polar night descends, weeks or months where the sun never breaches the horizon, only a deep blue twilight at midday. This rhythm, this extreme alternation of abundance and deprivation, of eternal day and profound night, is encoded into the national psyche. It creates a society that must store light, both physically and emotionally. It explains the national obsession with cabins, the hit, a retreat into nature that is less an escape and more a return to the fundamental state. This is the concept of friluftsliv, the free air life. It is not a hobby. It is a cultural imperative, a spiritual practice of reconnecting with the landscape that shaped you. In a modern, wealthy Norway, the most sacred act might be a silent ski trip into the forest, alone or with family, to simply be in the cold, clear air. The land provided the stage, the people wrote a drama of exploration, union, and stubborn independence. By the 8th century, the mastery of the sea and the pressures of population and climate pushed Norse warriors, traders, and settlers outward. The Viking Age was not merely a time of raiding, it was a vast diaspora. They settled Iceland, Greenland, reached the coast of North America, established the Kievan Rus, and left their linguistic mark across the British Isles and Normandy. They were extraordinary shipbuilders, navigating by sun and stars. This era established a self-image of the Norwegian as an explorer, a venturer into the unknown. But at home, consolidation was slow. Norway was unified by kings like Harald Fairhair around 872, but it frequently fell under the dominion of its neighbors, first Denmark for 4 centuries, then Sweden. For over 500 years, Norway lacked its own sovereign institutions. This long period of subjugation bred a quiet, persistent nationalism, centered on language, folk traditions, and that unshakable connection to the land. Independence finally came peacefully in 1905, when Norway dissolved its union with Sweden. The nation entered the 20th century with a strong democratic tradition, a homogeneous population, and a developing economy based on shipping, fishing, and hydropower. Then, in the late 1960s, history offered Norway a second founding. Vast reservoirs of oil and gas were discovered in the North Sea. This was a pivotal moment. The Netherlands had discovered gas earlier and suffered Dutch disease, where resource wealth made other industries uncompetitive and distorted the economy. Norway watched and learned. With remarkable foresight and consensus, the political establishment decided that this windfall would not be spent immediately. Instead, it would be managed for the long term. The state-owned company Equinor, then Statoil, was created to ensure national control. A special tax regime was designed to capture the economic rent. And most famously, in 1990, the Government Pension Fund Global was established. This is not a traditional pension fund. It is a sovereign wealth fund, the largest in the world, currently valued at over $1.5 trillion. The rules are simple: the government can only spend the fund's expected real return, roughly 3% per year, to balance the budget. The principle is intergenerational equity. The oil belongs not just to today's citizens, but to future Norwegians who will live after the oil is gone. The fund is invested ethically in thousands of companies and properties across the globe, making every Norwegian a de facto global shareholder. It is the ultimate expression of the long-term, communal thinking born from the land itself, a financial glacier, growing slowly, patiently, to shape the future. This oil wealth built the modern Norwegian welfare state. It is comprehensive, universal healthcare, free higher education, generous unemployment benefits, and perhaps the world's most family-friendly policies, including extensive paid parental leave. The social contract is clear and stark. Personal income taxes are high, often between 35 to 45%, and consumption taxes are a steep 25%. In return, the state ensures a remarkable baseline of security, dignity, and opportunity. Poverty is rare. Inequality, as measured by the Gini coefficient, is among the lowest in the world. This is not socialism in the ideological sense, it is pragmatic social democracy, funded by a non-renewable natural resource and accepted by a population with a strong trust in state institutions and each other. It is the ultimate fusion of Viking-era collectivism, where survival in a harsh climate required cooperation, with 20th-century social planning and 21st-century global finance. So what does this unique societal project feel like on a Tuesday afternoon? The texture of daily life in Norway is woven from threads of nature, wealth, and a unique social code. Cities like Oslo, Bergen, and Trondheim are clean, orderly, and stunningly expensive. A simple lunch can cost $30, a beer $15. The high cost of living, driven by high wages and taxes, is the most immediate shock to an outsider. But within this system, life has a distinctive quality. There is a profound sense of security. The fear of medical bankruptcy, of unaffordable education, of destitution in old age, is largely absent. This removes a layer of background anxiety common in many societies. Child rearing is a shared national project. Parents receive 49 weeks of paid leave at full pay to share between them, with a dedicated quota for the father. Public spaces are filled with fathers pushing prams, a normalized and celebrated sight. Schools emphasize play, outdoor time, and equality, with less focus on intense academic competition in the early years. The physical environment reflects the values. Architecture is often minimalist, functional, and made of wood, blending with the landscape. Public transportation is efficient and widely used. There is a relentless focus on outdoor activity, the friluftsliv. It is common to see people skiing through city parks at night under lamplight or taking a morning swim in the fjord year-round. The cabin culture is central. Over 40% of Norwegians have access to a simple retreat without modern luxuries, meant for disconnection and immersion in nature. Socially, Norway operates under the subtle but powerful influence of janteloven, the law of Janti. Articulated by Danish-Norwegian author Axel Sandemos, it is a set of unofficial rules that emphasize humility, collectivism, and discourage standing out. You're not to think you are anything special. You're not to think you are as good as we are. While often critiqued as stifling ambition and individuality, many Norwegians see it as a guardian of their cherished equality, a social pressure valve that prevents the ostentatious displays of wealth that could fracture communal trust. Conversations are often direct, with little small talk. Personal space is valued, and silence in company is not seen as awkward but comfortable. Culturally, Norway's small population has an outsized impact. It has a rich literary tradition from Ibsen's psychological dramas to the Nordic noir thrillers of Jo Nesbø. Its black metal music scene, born in the 1990s, is a globally influential, if controversial, cultural export that drew thematically on Norway's dark winters, pagan history, and stark landscapes. In art, Edvard Munch's The Scream remains an icon of modern anxiety. In sport, the consistent dominance in winter sports, particularly cross-country skiing and biathlon, is a point of intense national pride, a direct extension of everyday life into professional competition. No utopia exists without its tensions, and the Norwegian model, for all its success, faces profound challenges and contradictions. The first and most glaring is the source of its wealth, fossil fuels. Norway is a global leader in electric vehicle adoption, with over 80% of new cars sold being electric, powered almost entirely by clean hydropower. Its domestic carbon footprint is relatively low. Yet, it remains a major exporter of oil and gas, which when burned abroad create a carbon footprint many times larger than Norway's domestic emissions. The country faces an existential moral and economic dilemma. Can it be a climate leader while its wealth is built on hydrocarbons? The political debate is fierce, pitting the need to fund the welfare state against the urgent demands of the climate crisis. There are no easy answers. The second challenge is integration. For decades, Norway was a highly homogeneous society. Since the 1970s, immigration, initially from Pakistan and Vietnam, and later from across Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, has increased. Today, over 18% of the population has an immigrant background. The welfare state is universal, but integration into the social fabric, the norms of janteloven, the language, the job market, has been uneven. Incidents of discrimination and debates over immigration policy reveal strains in a society built on deep, often unspoken, cultural consensus. The 2011 terrorist attacks by a right-wing extremist targeting a government building and a Labour Party youth camp violently exposed these underlying tensions around national identity and multiculturalism. A third challenge is rural depopulation. The magnet of opportunity, jobs, education, services, is in the cities, particularly Oslo. Many small coastal and inland communities, the historic heartland of Norway, are slowly aging and emptying. The government subsidizes these areas heavily to maintain a population presence across the country, but the demographic tide is difficult to reverse. This threatens not just local cultures but also the national ideal of equal living conditions for all, regardless of geography. Economically, there are concerns about complacency. The oil fund creates a buffer that can soften economic shocks, but some economists warn it can also reduce the incentive for innovation and productivity growth in the non-oil private sector. The high cost of living and a strong currency make Norwegian exports expensive. There is an ongoing search for the next oil. Industries like marine biotechnology, offshore wind, and green technology that can sustain prosperity in a post-oil future. Finally, there is the quiet, personal challenge of life in a society where material needs are so thoroughly met. Some sociologists point to a different kind of anxiety, the pressure of freedom, the search for meaning when survival is guaranteed, and the subtle social constraints of a culture that values conformity. Rates of antidepressant use, while complex to interpret, are notable. The long, dark winters still impose a psychological toll, despite the societal wealth. Norway stands at a crossroads, as all living nations do. It is a country that took the raw materials of geology and history, the harshness of the land, the fortitude of its people, the accident of oil, and constructed one of the most stable, equitable, and prosperous societies in human history. It is a testament to long-term thinking, to a profound belief in the collective, and to the power of trust. But its legacy is still being written. The choices it makes in the coming decades, about its oil, its climate role, its integration of new Norwegians, its care for its remote communities, will determine whether the Norwegian model is a unique artifact of a specific time and resource, or a durable blueprint for a good society. As the northern light fades once more into the blue twilight of winter, the fundamental Norwegian truth remains: prosperity is not just a bank account, but the ability to walk into a silent forest and feel at home. Security is not just a safety net, but the knowledge that your child, and their child, will inherit a share of the future. And identity is not just a passport, but the deep, quiet understanding of a land where the mountains meet the sea, and the light always, eventually, returns. We began with a land of stone and light, and we have seen the remarkable society built upon it. A society that took the accidental bounty of oil and transformed it into a patient covenant with time itself. But to understand Norway's soul, we must move beyond the mechanics of its wealth and the architecture of its cities, to the intangible foundation upon which it all rests. Security, in the Norwegian sense, is a radical idea. It is not merely the safety net that catches you when you fall, the healthcare, the unemployment benefits, the pension. These are just the visible instruments. True Norwegian security is a psychological state. It is the quiet, bone-deep knowledge that your child, and their child, will inherit not just a stable country, but a legitimate share of a deliberately nurtured future. It is the profound, intergenerational trust that the collective has made a promise in your name, and in the name of those yet to draw breath, and that this promise is guarded with religious fervor in the vaults of the central bank and in the laws of the Storting. This security turns time from an enemy into an ally. It allows ambition to be patient, and change to be deliberate. It transforms citizens from renters of their present moment into stewards of a century to come. And from this elongated sense of time grows a unique sense of identity. Norwegian identity is not a loud proclamation. It is not found in the boast or the flag. It is a deep, quiet understanding, a somatic memory. It is the understanding of a specific, severe geography, the feeling of granite underfoot, the taste of air sharpened by the ice cap, the specific sound of water against a fjord wall, the particular quality of the midnight sun's glare on a still lake. It is the internal compass that knows, without thinking, the path up the mountain behind the house, even in a blizzard. It is the acceptance of the winter's profound darkness not as a punishment, but as a necessary, silent chapter in an eternal story. It is the unshakable, almost pagan faith, born of 10,000 repetitions, that the light, no matter how complete the darkness, no matter how long the sun remains hidden below the horizon, always, eventually, returns. This is the core of the Norwegian spirit, not optimism, but a certainty of cycles. Not the avoidance of darkness, but a mastery of it. This majestic inheritance, however, is shadowed by a foundational paradox. The covenant with the future is funded by a resource that threatens to shrink that very future for the entire world. The Norwegian model is a brilliant answer to a 20th century question: how to manage a sudden, vast natural resource for the permanent good of a nation. But the 21st century asks a more uncomfortable question: can you build a moral future on a morally compromised past? Norway's electricity is famously green, its transportation increasingly so. Its domestic emissions are modest. Yet, its sovereign wealth and its geopolitical influence are inextricably linked to the continued extraction and sale of oil and gas, hydrocarbons that, when burned abroad, create a carbon footprint dwarfing Norway's own. This creates a national schizophrenia, a constant, vigorous, and deeply felt ethical debate. In the halls of parliament, in newspaper columns, in university seminars, and around kitchen tables, the same question echoes: are we climate leaders or hypocrites? The tension is not hidden, it is the central political drama of the age. The state-owned energy giant Equinor invests heavily in wind and carbon capture while searching for new oil fields. The government pension fund Global divests from coal and deforestation while its core capital remains hydrocarbon revenue. The nation is trying, in real time, to perform brain surgery on itself, to separate the vital organs of its welfare state from the fossil fuel bloodstream that currently sustains them. It is an attempt to transition from being an oil producer to being an oil inheritor, living off the interest of the past while investing solely in a green future. The outcome of this agonizing pivot will be Norway's most significant legacy to the world: a manual for how a wealthy, resource-dependent society can consciously uncouple itself from its own source of wealth. Simultaneously, the very idea of who the covenant includes is being stretched and tested. The Norwegian folk, a potent word implying a people united by shared fate and character, was for centuries defined by a rare homogeneity. The famed social trust, the ease of the welfare state, the unspoken codes of janteloven, all functioned within a culturally cohesive sphere. Since the 1970s, that sphere has dramatically expanded. Successive waves of immigration, from Pakistan, Vietnam, Somalia, Poland, Syria, and across the globe, have made modern Norway visibly, audibly diverse. Over 18% of the population now has an immigrant background. This diversification is the second great stress test of the model. The welfare state is universal in law, offering its services to all legal residents. But integration, the seamless weaving of new threads into the old social fabric, is a more complex project. Does janteloven, with its pressure to conform and not stand out, help newcomers assimilate, or does it alienate them? Can the deep, nature-based, silence-comfortable Norwegian identity expand to include those whose roots are in bustling, communal urban landscapes elsewhere? The tragic events of July 22, 2011, when a far-right terrorist attacked the government quarter and a Labour Party youth camp, explicitly targeting the nation's multicultural political elite, violently exposed the fractures that can appear when the definition of "we" is in flux. The response, however, was telling. In the days that followed, the country did not retreat into nativism. It gathered in the hundreds of thousands, holding roses in a powerful, silent march for democracy, diversity, and åpenhet, openness. The memory of that day is now woven into the national narrative, a somber benchmark against which tolerance is measured. The challenge remains daily and diffuse, in schools, in workplaces, in housing patterns. The Norwegian experiment now includes a sub-question: can a high-trust society built by a small, similar group maintain its cohesion while successfully incorporating significant difference? The answer will determine whether the Norwegian model is a beautiful but closed chapter in history, or a replicable blueprint for a generous, stable, globalized future. While its cities globalize, Norway faces an internal geographical rift. The magnetic pull of opportunity, the high-skilled jobs, the universities, the cultural hubs, is intensely concentrated in the south, particularly the Oslo region. This leaves the foundational Norway, the Norway of the scattered coastal communities and the deep inland valleys, facing a slow, quiet emptying. These places are the custodians of the very identity we spoke of, the intimate connection to the specific, harsh, beautiful patch of earth. But as the young leave, schools close, services shrink, and the average age ticks upward. The state actively fights this tide with massive subsidies, ensuring air and ferry routes remain open, that hospitals have outposts, that broadband reaches the remotest fjord. It is a deliberate, expensive policy to maintain a populated country, based on the principle that all citizens, regardless of postcode, deserve a decent quality of life. It is an attempt to resist the global trend of hyperurbanization, to honor the geography that formed the nation. But it is a struggle against economic gravity. The survival of these communities is not just about nostalgia, it is about preserving a way of life, a reservoir of practical knowledge, and a different, slower relationship with the environment that the increasingly urbanized global population may desperately need to remember. Finally, within the fortress of material security, there exists a more private, psychological landscape. When the immediate struggles for survival and status are so thoroughly mitigated by the state, what defines a life? Some sociologists point to a different kind of challenge in Scandinavia, the pressure of freedom, the anxiety of possibility, the search for meaning in a landscape where material want is absent. Rates of antidepressant use, though complex to interpret, are notable. The long, dark winters impose a biological and emotional toll that even the best social system cannot fully illuminate. This hints at the limits of the political project. The state can provide security, opportunity, and equality. But it cannot provide purpose, connection, or joy. These must be found in the quiet room of individual life, in family, in friluftsliv, in art, in faith, in community service. The Norwegian model creates the space for a good life, perhaps the greatest space ever afforded to an entire population. But it cannot live that life for you. The final lesson of Norway might be that the ultimate human challenges, loneliness, meaning, our place in the cosmos, persist, even when every other problem is solved. And so, our journey across this land of light and legacy comes to a close. We have traced the path from ancient glaciers to sovereign funds, from Viking ships to electric ferries, from silent fjords to vibrant, questioning cities. Norway stands as a profound testament to human foresight, a reminder that society is a choice, and that the most important investments are often those we make not for ourselves, but for generations we will never meet. If this exploration of Norway's story resonated with you, if it offered a new perspective or deepened your curiosity, then this project has found its purpose. The greatest compliment you can give is to become a part of this community of the curious. If you found value in this deep dive, please consider supporting this channel. Subscribe to join us as we continue to explore the ideas, places, and stories that shape our world. Leave a comment below with your thoughts on Norway, or tell us which nation or idea we should journey to next. Share this documentary with someone who appreciates thoughtful, long-form storytelling. Your engagement is what makes this exploration possible. It allows us to dedicate the time and care needed to craft these comprehensive portraits. Thank you for spending your valuable time here. For now, from the land of the midnight sun and quiet reflection, we sign off.